Call to order the Lowell City Council budget meeting Wednesday, May 17th, 2023 at 6 o'clock. Roll call, please.
Mayor Bennett,
Here.
Councilor Harris,
Here.
Councilor Stratus,
And
Councilor Weathers,
Here.
Councilor Murray, Committee Member George, Committee Member B. Wilson,
Here.
Committee Member Petrie.
Here.
yeah, that's the forum. Okay, so let's stand for the pledge. There's the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Okay, our first order of business is to select a budget committee chairperson. Does anybody want to volunteer? There, does anybody? Yes.
I'll nominate others. Oh, no. Oh,
Okay.
that's right. I wasn't thinking. How about Mr. Petrie?
New guy? Yeah.
I don't even know what I'm doing
I
yet.
second that. Like new neighbor.
We're easy.
Why didn't you do that?
You know, nothing, you told me nothing wrong here.
Yeah.
No, I know, again, I just know that. Thanks.
Did you get any thoughts? Just call. That's all you have to say, just call. Works for me.
Maybe we should just have Bill. Lisa's down.
Good.
Like not. Okay.
Bill?
Sure, what to call details.
Just have a look at the agenda.
So we did. Okay.
Okay.
Let's see. Are you willing?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, all those in favor of a 24-hour committee member, Fairly, John Petrie. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? It's yours from here on. That's for approval, agenda. Yes.
I did too. You needed a copy.
Okay. Right. That's next.
The next step, so basically.
Yeah.
Okay. So, you get approval of the agenda?
We make a motion.
Approval of the agenda?
Spoken, that's, motion and a second by Maureen and Gail. That's for vote. We have a vote. All in
All
favor?
those in favor, say aye.
Those in favor, say aye. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, all vote. Here are the. Yes. Okay, we have this.
Approval of the agenda.
Approval of minutes.
I get a motion for approval of the minutes.
All approve the minutes. Second. We have a second? We have a
Motion and a second.
all in favor.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? So it looks like the next one. Old business?
No old business on the agenda, Mr. Chair. No old business on the agenda, Mr.
Okay,
Chair.
so. New business. New business, number one. Presentation of the city's administrative equipment and budget for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2023, ending June 30, 2024. Then city administrator Jeremy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll pull up my presentation on my PowerPoint. Good evening, everybody. This is to present the city administrator's recommended budget for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2023 and ending June 30th, 2024. I have about a 15-minute presentation that I'd like to give, and I'd ask you to keep your questions until the end so that I can get through the materials. Afterwards, I'll pause for questions. We can discuss the presentation, any other questions that you have, and then we'll dive into the budget detail sheets, focusing on major changes compared to the previous or the current budget year. Any questions before I get started? Okay. We have much to be proud of, and we have accomplished many of our goals this budget year. The budget message discusses our accomplishments over the past budget year. I'm not going to dive into that. Interested members of the public can read those details at their leisure. We have a lot of ground to cover tonight, and I want to dive right into the numbers behind the recommended budget. The water fund is in the most challenging financial condition, so that's where I want to start. This slide shows the water fund's ending balances since 2018. Every year, except for the small surplus in 2019, the water fund's balance has declined. This graph shows that the balance at fiscal year end in 2022 was $476. This is based on the unaudited financial statements, as we are currently finishing our financial statement audit. I learned yesterday at 6 p.m. that our auditors discovered an error in this figure. The error has to do with our basis of accounting. The city uses what's called a cash basis of accounting, but our accounting software uses an accrual basis. Under a cash basis of accounting, we record revenues once we receive payment. Under an accrual basis, we record revenues once we earn them. In the process of converting from the accrual to the cash basis of accounting, our accountant removed not only the water funds, but also the sewer fund's accounts receivable from the water fund's revenues. That means that the water fund's revenues were understated by about $40,000. And likewise, the balance was understated by $40,000. So the water fund's financial condition based on this new information is not as dire as what this graph would suggest. Since I received that information late, I wasn't able to factor it in. But I wanted you to know that. With this new information, it is likely that the intrafund loan that I proposed from the sewer fund is not going to be necessary. I believe, however, that my recommendations on improving the water fund's financial condition are still valid. We need at least $100,000 in the bank for the water fund, not only for cash flow, but also in case there were emergency situations throughout the year. So the message behind this graph is that the water fund balance has declined and we need to get it back on an upwards trajectory. This slide shows the magnitude of the water fund's operating deficit every year. That mostly has to do with one-time issues. For instance, during the construction project on a water main in 2020, there were numerous change orders, which increased the price of the construction. In 2021, we purchased water meters anticipating that we were going to get ARPA funding prior to the fiscal year end. We went ahead and placed that order, as you may recall, to get a discount, and we didn't receive that ARPA funding until the next fiscal year. So that's one reason why 2021 has such a big decline. There's also the water master plan. Some of that was charged out of the 2021 budget, and the offsetting grant wasn't received until 2022. So there were some, and for the current fiscal year, it's not shown on there, but we had the East First Street issue, which we're currently carrying those costs. So much of this has to do with one-time issues throughout the years. Also, our rate structure hasn't allowed us to keep up with increases in expenses. Using our most recent audited financial statements from 2018 to 22, Water fund revenues increased 10%. Fixed expenses, however, increased 16%. Variable expenses increased 157%. In the past, we applied a flat increase to both the flat part of the rate and the variable part of the rate without analyzing the costs that each part of those rates are supposed to cover. This year, I analyzed our rates in detail so that the fixed rate can cover fixed costs and the variable rate can cover variable costs. The first step in the analysis was projecting water consumption for the next fiscal year. As this slide shows, water consumption has declined slightly since 2020 and is projected to decline in 2024. As I'll state in my budget message, we should investigate why this is. For now, I project that we'll sell 26.1 million gallons of water into the next fiscal year. The next step was to calculate gallons of water charged at the lower tier for the variable rates, that is less than 5,000 gallons per month usage, and the higher tier, everything above 5,000 gallons. I assumed that the higher tier would be twice that of the lower tier. Then I calculated the water fund's variable expenses. Those are the expenses required to produce a gallon of water, such as chemicals, overtime, electricity, and so on. I calculated that a lower tier of $6.61 per 1,000 gallons and a higher tier of $13.23 per 1,000 gallons are necessary to cover those variable expenses based on these projections. For the monthly equivalent dwelling unit rate, I calculated the water fund's fixed costs. That includes the cost that we incur before a customer even turns on the water faucet, such as debt service, employee wages, and benefits, insurances, and so on. I added to that a targeted savings. Then I divided the total 331,270 by our projected EDUs to get a monthly rate of $46.72. It's important to make sure that our fixed rate covers our fixed costs. That way, in case consumption declines, we're guaranteed to recoup those costs. Based on this analysis, I proposed the following rates. The average water bill for a 4-member household would increase $52.80 per month for their water bill, $7.70 per month for their sewer bill. Now I want to talk about not only keeping our utilities financially sound, but also operationally sound. I included an appropriation for a water of $70,000 to replace the water plant's programmable logic controller, or PLC. That's the computer that automates the water plant. Our PLC failed a few months ago, and we're currently using a loaner system that itself is outdated and has failed. It's possible we could try to find grant funding for this, and in fact, I've attempted to do that already, but I went ahead and included that in case we wanted to move forward, since this is such an emergency situation. I included an appropriation of $30,000 for a water and sewer system rate study. With the decline in our water fund balance, as well as increases in our expenses, I believe we should hire a qualified rate consultant to assist us in developing a long-term financing and operations plan for our utilities. Since we have completed a water master plan and we're on the verge of completing a sewer master plan, this is also an opportune time to work with a professional to factor in our capital improvements needs into our long-term financial planning, and they can assist us in doing that. I now want to turn to the general fund. The largest source of revenues is from capital asset disposal for surplus properties. That's referring to the old City Hall and the northeast portion of Rolling Rock Park. Our plan is to use the sale proceeds to pay off the City Hall construction loan. I've not programmed the balance of the projected sales once we pay off the loan. Instead, that is to go towards a general fund balance. I discussed the general fund financial trends and condition in the budget message. This graph shows, for instance, that ongoing expenditures have outpaced revenues from operations every year since 2019. This graph removes one-time expenditures and revenues from the equation so that you can see the ongoing operations and ongoing revenues and the imbalance associated with that. This graph shows revenues adjusted for inflation and on a per capita basis. We would expect to see these revenues, which are revenues generated from operations such as property taxes, intergovernmental revenues, so on. We would expect to see them increase. Instead, they've remained virtually flat. Lastly, our contract services have increased to take about 40% of our general fund budget. To address these structural issues, one of my recommendations in the year ahead is to evaluate our largest sources of discretionary spending in the general fund. That includes the Oak Ridge Police contract. I recommend that the council lay the groundwork now for community involvement and discussion about the appropriate level of service and options for funding that service in the years ahead. And another largest source is our contract with Rain, which again, the council should evaluate next year when it's up for renewal. For now, this budget buys us some time as the projected ending fund balances for the current and projected year remain at a good level. Major spending recommendations include joining a digital records management program for the old City Hall archives. That way we can remove those old archives from the building, prepare it for sale, and we can address our lack of storage space at the new facility. I recommend an increase in the hours and the hourly rate for our accountant. I believe in the next few years, we're going to need to turn this into a part-time position. I include an appropriation to demolish the old City Hall building so that we can prepare that property for sale. We also have a budget for the library collection to be partially offset by book sales and fundraisers. I now want to talk about how this budget motivates our team members to continue performing at their high level. Last year, the council overhauled the pay scale to increase the minimum starting salary. I've budgeted for merit increases, which if approved would result in a 3.5% step increase on that pay scale. To be eligible, employees must have received that meets or exceeds expectations on their annual performance evaluation. The merit increase results in a $16,767 increase in wages. I recommend increasing the employer contribution to the health savings account. That hasn't been changed since 2010. The increases would bring the HSA contribution up to the deductible and would result in a $3,100 increase in expenditures. City Council's highest must-have goal was to hire a new Public Works employee. Based on my evaluation of the Public Works Department, I do not recommend hiring or creating that new position at this time. I do recommend creating a career path for our two operators. During my recent performance evaluation with them, they stated one motivating factor for them would be to have a career path with the city. This budget takes that into account, and if approved, I'll be coming to the council at a later date with a new job description. I anticipate that both employees would be eligible for promotion for that new position in about 6 months' time. Let's talk about the budget's other funding recommendations. I recommend a transfer from the general fund to the Blackberry Jam Festival Fund. Without that transfer, the Blackberry Jam Festival Fund would have a negative fund balance. There's funding to complete the sewer master plan and the sewer SDC fund. The street fund includes an appropriation for the East First Street repairs. It's my position, based on our investigation, that the city is not at fault for that. I've included an appropriation for that project in case the council wants to go ahead and get started while we work on the cost recovery. This budget does not include any parks renovations above normal maintenance. The Parks SDC does have an appropriation for parks projects if there's anything capacity increasing that we identify and that we want to complete next budget year. I want to conclude with the next steps needed to approve the budget. We have a second budget committee meeting scheduled for next Wednesday, if that's necessary. I recommend that the council hold a public hearing at the June 6th meeting with a final vote for approval at the June 20th meeting. We are required to approve the budget before July 1. This budget is a first draft. We already know that things are going to change. I've spelled that out tonight. Between now and final budget adoption, we have the opportunity to make any final edits, any updates to our projections, any changes the budget committee wishes to make. What questions do you have for me?
The water fund, thing that jumped out at me most at the last night, that the numbers were, or overstated. So you were at a negative 50, negative 40,000 on the 2023. Or was it, oh, no, was it $400? We were only at $400. That's right.
That's correct.
We're only at $400. The cushion that you like, you suggested like 50,000. And so we're pretty, if you make that adjustment that's needed on the books, we're pretty much there. But
Correct.
okay.
That is
That's
correct.
what I was thinking that was before, but before last night, that was like, you know, wow, I was just, how do we get that much in the hole? But now we know.
And like it stated, we're not keeping up with rates. Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah.
Jeremy, just to double check on the TLC, if we went ahead and purchased that or started working on it, we could still look for a grant to replace that one. Or would we have to wait?
It depends on what grants. Most grants, they're not going to pay, reimburse you for something that you've already paid.
But it's really important, so.
I have a question, perhaps remedial, on the water fund, the 59 pages. I don't know how to read all the debt service.
Okay.
What are all those things for?
Yes.
Get better.
Okay. If you turn to page 71. I have a debt service schedule.
So help me out on the water fund debt service, the first item, 7110. So that would be, how do I read that?
Okay, so you want to match those up to the.
Yeah.
Okay. Bear with me while I navigate.
And I also didn't have an understanding for 1 year, year 5, you know, there's all going to be in the budget, will some of them expire soon? So we have a.
No, these are all ongoing. Let me answer your first question, then I answer the second one. All right. So JO 5001. All right, if you look at on page 59. Account number 230-800-7112. $7122. That matches up to, on page 71, the first item under the Business Oregon Pioneer Street Relocation JO 5001.
So that was a project, and you're something.
Correct. So, the debt service is 5,000 on the schedule, 5,218. There's some change there, so it's rounded up to 5,219. All right, so 230, 800, 7124. All right, 17,939. That is the second one on the debt service schedule. Again, that's rounded up $1. The 230, 800, 7125. That's the third one, the 78,811 on page 71. And then it has the corresponding interest below that. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay. As to your question, let me look at our financial statements. This is all long-term debt, so it's going to continue. Some of our loans in the water and sewer fund continue into 2056. So we don't have any loans dropping off this year.
In a general way, feel very strongly that it's hard to pay for the services. Pretty general. Not thrown down in the detail, although I hate reading through this, but we can't get more efficient with whatever we're doing, whether labor, materials, and other option, from my perspective, to fix those on the other side of the equation.
This was a very difficult process for me, and that's one reason why I believe professional assistants could do a better analysis than I can, and maybe help us identify some efficiencies.
Are you thinking of that before we actually raise it, or?
No, I believe it needs to be done this year,
Yeah.
but as far as our 5-year plan, that's where a rate study consultant would come in.
That's what I think.
When was the last meeting?
We did one for the current year's budget. That was, I believe, a 5% across the board.
So the citizens got their rating.
Yeah.
Just about every year.
Yeah.
But the perception, being the new guy, and of course you've got people, oh, you moved to Lowell, oh, great, oh, yeah, I still got outside of Lowell. The water's really expensive out there. So. Can the average Joe of the city of Lowell, out there, stomach another one? I mean,
Well,
yeah, I mean, I hear what you're
It's
saying.
a pretty big one.
Yeah,
I'm
it's a
having
huge,
trouble
huge jump.
stomaching,
Yeah,
but I also can't drive by the city not charging for what it costs.
Yeah.
How can, as a citizen, how can I allow that, and you can't just keep going the hole? And I don't know all the other funding options, and what's available,
but,
and it is really expensive.
but what scares me is, and this is just coming from years of accounting. Whoops, we overstated 40 county. What? in this fund, that's a lot of money. And so we're asking the citizens of Lowell to, in essence, if you look at it one way, go, pay for our mistake.
Well,
Now, long term, there's a problem, yes. But
I have some
Well-
tenants that are gonna have a tough time with this. And I wonder if, to make it, I'm not sure what you can do with this, but it seems like the sewer department's doing fine. Is to raise the sewer rates and not raise the water rates so high. In other words, balance it out a little bit, so it doesn't look like just one water's kicking us in the butt. And I don't know if you can make a permanent loan from the city department to the water department. It seems to me it's all the same. The water and the sewer are what we sell. And if we get so that it just makes no sense for people to move here because they're leaving Springfield where it's. I understand the more people you have, the less it should happen. We're actually building a lot more around here than we ever used to have. And we're not done yet. In the interim, is there any way that we can make this swallow a little more palatable if we raise sewer rates and don't raise water rates? That's what I'm trying to say.
You make some excellent points, and I'd like to address that. The first is, I did take the sewer fund's good financial condition into consideration. There were some projects in the sewer fund that are covered under this budget by using fund balance to pay for them. In other words, rates aren't increased to cover them. That's probably a good $60,000 or $70,000 of fund balance that's going to pay for it. And so the sewer fund doesn't increase as much. To your second point, state law regulates interfund loans. So if the sewer fund makes an interfund loan to the water fund, it is required to be paid off in a year's time.
I know we're talking about money, but it might help for context. If you don't listen to every city council meeting, I have a lot of anxiety about our current water system and how much we have to run it during the summer. So I don't know if Matt wants to talk to that, but our current system as is, if we don't have a fund balance, I'm very anxious about a catastrophe happening over the summer and that makes us even more trying to deal with that. So I don't know if that's relevant to this meeting.
a couple things. I mean, I know it's cheaper in Springfield, but I think if you look at rates, we're not exorbitantly above other small towns. At the same time, just so everybody's aware, we agonize over this every year. We don't want to raise anybody's rates if we ever keep from doing that. And you know, so it is a real concern, and this is big. But like Lisa said, you know, we have a responsibility to make sure that, you know, things are running and we don't keep going. So we're gonna have to find an answer.
Well, it's kind of, we don't have any economy scale here. 1,000 people, 100 people, can't compete with Springfield having a
Right. Well, that's what I mean. You can't compare to.
So I don't know, what is the top, say this, that, what can the, water and sewer plant handle? Can we have, 1,000 houses or 500 houses, or can we serve 2,000 houses with our existing facility? What's the max?
So sewer plant, it has capacity galore. We did an upgrade to that in 2004, 2012. In my opinion, the city will never outgrow a sewer plant. The actual treatment facility itself, the collections is a different area, we need to do some work there, but it was designed for about 2.5 million. So about the size of a 10,000 community. So when they did the upgrades, they did it right there. The water plant, on the other hand, was originally built back in the 40s. It is a very small water plant. We are restricted to 200 gallons a minute. I will let you guys know for the last 4 days, the city has been using about 280 gallons a minute, 24 hours a day, 365. So the plant is not turned off Friday night when the weather got nice. It's not always like that. You know, people are watering, doing their thing. And then we also have leaks. You know, it's an old system. The system was put in the 50s. It was a shared well system, you know, a long time ago. The water plant, as far as capacity, this is coming from the engineers and people who did the study. We can handle a set amount of homes, right? And I don't remember the exact number that was just produced on you, I still have it, but we need an upgrade to maintain the current level of service that we provide. We have 2 subdivisions currently going in, one that's gonna be done in about 3 months, 16 more homes, all gonna be irrigated, so there's gonna be some more usage there. And that's why we did the water master plan. That's one of the funding things that's in here, we need to move forward with that. But yeah, capacity is a big thing. We need to make some pretty significant changes to the plant to be able to produce more. We can pull 750 gallons a minute out of the lake, and we're not even close to that. So hopefully with the new upgrades in the next 5, 10, 15 years. We just need to bring the water plant to where the level of the sewer plant is, so that we're running the plant, in the wintertime, 4 to 6 hours a day. And in summertime, once you hit about 12 hours of running in a day, they cannot keep that. That's where people kind of start to get worried, because we have another issue like we had on East First Street. And we drained the reservoirs completely, but we had water back to the citizen within 3 hours, and we made it up in 3 days. If that happens in the summertime, we're gonna be hauling water in from Eugene Springfield. We're gonna be having water trucks here, and be handing out bottled water, because there's no way we'd be able to keep up with it. So, yeah, the water plant is nearing capacity.
So does the budget, the calculations, when you say that it will recoup the fixed costs, does that take into consideration, I don't know what's necessary, building, electronics, tech, structure, whatever that is for the new or upgraded water plant? Does that put anything aside for that? Or is that just meeting the need?
It's just meeting our needs this year. It's not factoring in our capital improvements plan. That's what I'm hoping a rate consultant can help us figure out.
I knew that. Okay. So on that note, on the expert person that we're thinking about hiring, don't have a problem with experts, but I'm always looking for other creative, unusual ways to handle things. Is it possible or even appropriate to have a U of O project dive into our water sewer issue as a class
Yeah.
senior folks would do, and that, there's sometimes they have projects out there like that. This is obviously pretty advanced.
That's a great question. I've been through a rate study before, and it's a niche field. I believe that they're called a qualified rate consultant, is a specific credential that they have, but that's a great question.
I wonder, we've had a pretty late spring. If that has anything to do with the water usage, what the graphs are showing, you're not understanding why they're going down when they should be going up. There's the fact that in the previous years, we had a really dry winter, and people started using water earlier than they are this year. I don't know. It just seems all of this is kind of earth-shattering to me. As us around the table here probably can afford this, no problem. It is only $18 or something like that a month more. But there's a lot of people out there, $18 is whether they get a little rare. And water, of course, is something they really need. But if we tighten up, if we increase these rates to the point where all they're doing is using it to drink water and take a bath once a week, that may be what's going to happen. There has to be some way that we can get around these kind of expenditures when we actually have money in SDCs and a few other projects that we can use to what we really need, and that's some water. So I know we have to stand on some kind of oil because of the fact that the state says this is what we got to do. But I think that knowledgeable people will listen to our argument and let us change a few things. I just think it just doesn't make sense to continue to try to get one department to be profitable when other departments are doing great. And we can't siphon some of that fund to the department that's having problems without making it a loan that department has to pay back with interest or whatever. Just wonder if that's the way to run a railroad. It's the way I feel.
This is, a hypothetical, but, we're, in our report, we're saying that replacing the old water meters with new water meters that were deemed to be up to 75% inactive. We like to think that that error might have been in our favor, but maybe that error wasn't in our favor, maybe it was 75% the opposite, right? So we've got a phased approach of replacing water meters on a set number each year for the last few years. Maybe we're actually seeing the true usage wasn't what we thought it was before, and that step increase you're seeing over each year for the last 3 to 4 years is as we've implemented a percentage of your water meters up to the current 100%, we're actually seeing the accuracy come closer to report that really, because the citizens of Lowell were using as much water as they were being billed for historically, and that can account for that step decrease in water usage each year.
I can only speak for a little bit after Tim. So, I'll tell you guys, we have had 1 meter since I worked here, that actually read more than what we used. And if it was faulty, it wasn't a new one, it was the old rotary one. Actually the meter just fed with no water went through it. However, we have analyzed the meters, and I'm wondering if I can pick on it a little bit. So I replaced, Ring's house was part of the 25 we did back in 16. You guys remember the 25 we did in 16? Per meter, was probably the first meter ever made. We have it at the water plant because the number 7 serial number is Smithsonian. So anyways, per meter still worked fine. Did it work 100%? No. But it was within, the 80% accuracy. We'll put the new one in and immediately our usage went up. And it wasn't just Marine, it was several homes on that street. Well, then we switched them again and now we're on the cam strip ones, which have the highest low level detection that we've ever seen out of a meter and can ever come out. And what happened is people got more cautious. I'm telling you, when we put a meter in, it don't matter if it's in for 3 days or the whole 30 days, somebody will call, why is my water bill higher? So people became more cautious, and that's what happened. So like, oh, I'm using 800 gallons more than I thought I did. Well, we're just in a big deal. 800 gallons is, like $3 a month. But to some people it is, that's $40 a year. So they would either put a low flow on, or maybe they didn't wash the car, maybe they took the car off. We've noticed a big change, and even our big users, the school. I mean, the school is by far one of our biggest water users, and they irrigate city water. So and we love the school for that.
No, only in the front.
Oh, in high school. Yes, but it's a lot of water. And so I noticed that since we put a brand new 2-inch meter in there, they also had their watering has definitely went down. I could see the trend graph, of how they're watering. It's still green, it's still beautiful. And yes, it is a later summer so far. We have had the dry weather like we have, but looking at last year, their usage overall with the new meter has came down slightly. Their meter was very old, so at the high school. So yeah, I'm not saying that that's possible, but we spot test meters. We have to keep up. So we'll literally take a 5-gallon bucket, go to somebody's house, turn the hose on, time it, register it, and that's how we check meter inaccuracy. We have to do 10% of the system each year. So yeah, it's just being more wise. And then the comment to add new homes. I live in a brand new subdivision, 26 homes. Every one of those homes, I've already moved in my house, was built with low flow, eco-friendly, cautious, water fixtures, the dishwasher, the washing machine, everything. But everybody on that street irrigates just like I do. So they're still, in the middle of the range for you, the city. You look at like First Street and Sunridge, they're some of the higher users with not just the garden, but just average year round. Those homes were put in, some of them early 2000s, when the whole low flow shower heads and the dishwashers and everything wasn't near what it is now. I mean, it's almost half of what it was 20 years ago, just to do a load of dishes and dishwashers. So yeah, a lot of the newer stuff, you would think we'd be selling more water, but actually we're just it's a real slow decline. We have more customers, so we're sharing that over everybody, but the usage overall is just going to continue, especially when somebody gets a bill in the mail and says, oh, My bill went up $30 because I did this. And we definitely noticed that, me and Jeremy talked about that. Had a lot of shocked people in that new subdivision. Did beautiful green yards when they moved in. And you get a water bill for probably double what you were expecting. Sprinklers got turned off.
The First Street problem, that is gravel road now. Was the city responsible for that?
Was the city responsible for the damage?
For the damage?
I'll let Jeremy answer that.
No,
Then what kind of recovery are we after to get that fixed, and who's paying it?
all I can say is we're working on it.
Is a lawyer working on it? I mean, it seems like it should be cut and dried. Our insurance company should be after their insurance company, and it all should be not an issue that we're looking at here, but it is in the budget. And I don't understand why that is, or why we're even thinking about it. It has to be somebody else paying for that.
It has to be, I agree. And I agree that it should be cut and dry, but sometimes things don't work that way.
We gotta make sure we account for it.
Well, what I'm suggesting is if our cost recovery drags on for months or potentially longer, one of the things that the council may look at is that depending on how that plays out is loan financing, so we can go ahead and get that street put in.
That's time sensitive
Yes,
because of the weather.
correct.
We need to get it done or it's gonna be a real problem.
Well, you put a little country road oil on it, and it'll keep the dust from flying and keep driving on it.
That's not what
Tell me,
people
fix
on
it.
that street think.
Go around. There's a way out, not driving it. So there is another way, but it just seems to me that there should be something, I would be hot after that kind of stuff.
I promise you we are.
Everybody's just trying to make sure we're covered in the budget. Yeah. Because it's.
Jeremy, it's great that we found that additional fund in the water balance, but that doesn't change your proposed rate.
No, it takes the timeline for us to reach the 100,000 goal. Instead of turning that into a 2 to 3 year plan, it's something we could achieve within this budget year. But it doesn't change my overall recommendation.
Because no matter what, we are not.
And I'm happy with the idea that fund balance within the year. Because even with the decline in use in buy house, we are still pegging that water treatment plant, and that's just up at night. That would be disastrous and very costly. So I don't know how to get around that.
The ultimate is moratorium on building.
And we were in one when I started.
Yeah.
Same thing, so that's an additional risk.
I need to ask, I paid a lot of money into SDCs. Is there a way that the SDC fund could buy some of the new equipment that we need for the water department, so they could run 24 hours without a guy down there? Which is $70,000 worth of something I think we're getting here. What are SDCs for, if not something like that?
Yes, the laws having to do with SDCs are strict and they're specific. A project is required to be SDC eligible. It must increase capacity and it must be identified in a master plan.
And doesn't that increase the capacity?
It maintains it, and one of the big reasons, we tried this out. One of the big things is right now it's classified as repair. It's not a new, even though the PLC will be new, it's replacing the existing PLC. We have talked about some options, factoring this PLC and talked to council about this, that this will be the PLC that transfers to the new water plant or whatever we do down the road. So that does open up some of it eligible, or could be, let's open it up, but could possibly be eligible for some SDC funding, but not all of it.
What happens if we use it and they ding us. They, oh, can't do that. What happens?
Whoever approves that purchase could be personally liable.
So the city's personally liable for.
I would be, the mayor and I, our names would be on the checks, so, we would have to pay up.
Otherwise, they'll people doing it
Yeah,
day and night.
Well, there's a situation where we maybe need to do something. Think about the fact that if we get too damn expensive in our little town, we're done. Nobody's gonna move you. And the word's out. You don't wanna go to Lowell because you can't afford the utilities. You know, and so we're, it's a double-edged sword. It really is. We have to try to figure out some other ways to go so that we don't have to get too stupid. I just, that's the way I feel with it. I know you're, yeah, but come on, what can we do? Are you saying that our hands are tied? We just go to prison? That's it?
Well, we could look at making some cuts to the water fund, and if we want to go that route, they would have to be very severe cuts in the six-figure range.
That's all right.
If we wanted to keep rates the same, we would have
I
to,
will say the same,
okay,
but not so far out that it really is noticeable. You're talking 25 to 30%, which is what I thought I read here.
we would have to make offsetting cuts to the water fund. And no, we could do that analysis and look at it, but it would be very steep cuts.
And we haven't done that already. This is the only way we can go. You know, I'm looking at our federal government saying, and we just have to keep spending money. You know, it's somewhere, you have to finally say, wait a minute, this is maybe not the way to go. And as I read this, I'm going, wow. You know, I didn't see it coming. When I was mayor here, we thought we had ample water and sewer for double the size of the city. And all of a sudden now, that's not true, and I'm wondering what happened. I haven't been keeping up on it, but
I'll just jump in. Max is incredibly humble, and I'm saying it himself. I do think Max does this work every day. Comes to council every meeting, talk about new ways he's found to be efficient, new resources we have. So I just want to give credit here that this is not Max saying, well, there's nothing we can do, but we need more money. But on that topic, considering we're already at capacity, how would we cut on the water fund and not be in a worse situation than we are now? I don't even understand how that could be possible.
I don't either.
We need to get the expert in here and analyze it, because clearly it's not qualified to do that at this level. No insult to anyone here, but clearly, folks that do these systems are not the only city in this situation. And the inflationary pressure has only exacerbated. Clearly, what the kids like.
Just to give you guys a rough idea, our supplies that we buy from our vendors, it's like 2 rate increases last year and 1 this year. And the absolute essential that we have to have, and we use an off-brand, went up 25% this year. Couldn't seem like a lot of money, but electricity went up, we had no control over that, our chemicals went up. And pretty much everything that we use and get comes from overseas.
I can understand that.
And,
inflation.
you know, I try every year since I started. When I started, the sewer plant's in red. You know, we're very, you know, I think we're very cost wise here. We do that. You guys can all look at our wages, you know,
I'm just,
go somewhere else and make more money. Everybody look at what we like working here. We spend a lot of time in this, but Jeremy spent way more time than I did. Yeah, believe me, I'm shocked too. I live here now, so I get easily really possible. But I don't know where the changes.
So this, $70,000 controller, is, what's the life expectancy of that? Is that every 10 years we need to do one?
This would be the typical with technology has advanced so much since we got that put in. As Jeremy stated, the current one that we have is a loaner that is obsolete 2 years after it was put in. So you can get them off of eBay, they're very expensive, and you can take a chance that it works. And I want to make one point, that $70,000 is a quote that we got from a very specific person. This cost was identified in the master plan at almost $500,000. This is a huge cost saving. This is a special program, so there's no programming part, but the actual IT person part at $125 an hour. That is a screaming deal. We just don't have the funds to buy it, period. No, we tried everything. So, that $70,000, is literally the brains. It has, I'm gonna say 30 to 50 years, because that's what they typically tell you. Now, who knows, in the next 30 years, technology could, we might end up with Wi-Fi anymore, maybe something totally different, but, it will outgrow me. But I'm not saying there's not gonna be failures, stuff breaks, stuff happens, The first issue we had with PLC was due to a power outage, a scheduled power outage from Lane Electric, but didn't tell us about, but yeah, it should outgrow at least the master plan and new facility. I'm not saying you get that.
Outlook,
Yes, it should be far surpassed the 20 years that we just did fighting master.
And we asked.
Can you borrow the money for that from the sewer fund? With the understanding that you have to pay it back in a year. So you pay it back on Thursday and you borrow it again on Friday.
I don't know the budget law, that would be a question for Jeremy. We could do an interfund transfer, but
And just keep doing that until the water department does finally come up to speed. It might take 3 or 4 years of borrowing and paying back and borrowing again and paying back. In other words, I'm just trying to figure a way that they're legal, but it doesn't mean that we have to raise the rates immediately all this far. At this time, if we gradually get to that point in 3 or 4 years, it's going to be a lot more palatable than it is now.
So we could do a capital loan from the sewer fund. I believe the term length is longer than a year. I want to say 5 or 10 years. That would knock maybe we could run the numbers, maybe a couple dollars off of the increase needed.
So, the
Well-
sewer fund is doing well.
Correct.
Okay, here's grapple. You want to reduce the sewer fund fees? That's the
Well, that's what I'm saying. So that the numbers go the same.
Okay.
We already have projects in the plan using the fund balance in the sewer fund. So
Yeah.
if we reduce the sewer fund to do another project, we have to not do those, whatever those projects are. So that's not just money that's not, we have plans for that.
And then I'll get that.
And that'll get that one. And I just want to add, while we're talking about this, that there was a lot of frustration in council about the Santa Pack problem. And one of the things we kept bringing up is that they should have been raising rates at a higher rate every year instead of just kicking the can down the road and then hitting people. So I'm just worried that we don't do this now, and we hire a consultant, we add another year or two, it's just going to be even that much higher. I'm not saying this is an easy rate increase, but I'm concerned about just saying, well, we won't do it now, we'll just push it.
I'm
I'm
not
not pointing at
suggesting,
you. I'm
I'm not
pointing at you.
suggesting not raising the rates, I'm talking about doing both.
Yeah.
But don't just raise the rates without doing this, or we'll never get out of it.
So Jeremy, this may be ignorant, but you're recommending this. We aren't making a final decision on this rate increase tonight, or with the budget, are we? We are.
Not on
That's in the budget.
let me clarify that. Tonight, the rates are not before the budget committee. That will come to the council at a later meeting. But the numbers behind the rate increase are factored into the budget that you have before you tonight.
That's what I was trying to point.
But it's the same thing, but
That's what I was.
So you calculate after the error that was found yesterday? Did you redo the math, or is that rate increase still justifiable?
I believe that is still justifiable on the basis that the water fund balance needs to increase to a minimum of $100,000.
It is problematic, though. I mean, you gotta admit, that's really problematic to say that based on the number, we need X amount of increase, and then we find there's a mistake, and well, we need it anyway. Golly, that's a breach of trust. With anybody that knows what's going on and watch these riveting performances here. I'm just saying, I'm troubled by it. I'm not saying I'm against raising the rates.
Yeah, we're talking, it's nice even math, if 100K is what we're looking for, we're talking 40 games, they got the 40% difference. So, but we're still asking for 100% rating, even though we're only at 60%. Thanks, pal.
And the thing is, we're talking, the audit is last June. Last June, you know, so are we not reconciling accounts? I mean, I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about, you know, when I make a mistake, I think, oh my God, what else did I do? You know, I had a bad day and it's like, what on earth was, you know, was I tuned out? I think it doesn't inspire confidence in myself when I do that. So I naturally tend to do that as well. I mean, we've had that accounting system issue for a long time, right? I mean, that's not a.
Well, there's one mistake, and that's what I found. Somebody's had done something and they thought that that was the right way they're supposed to do it. And so they continue until they are correct.
I don't believe that's the case at all with this, because this audit is nearly wrapped up. The auditors have completed their field work. There was one transaction that was not correct, admittedly, but that is all that has been found.
It's because they went with cash too.
It was during the conversion process, correct?
So it wasn't entry, data entry type error. Okay.
But there was one this year. So there was one this year that was booked wrong. It was booked to all to the water and not to the sewer, the loan payment. That was in the financials in March or something.
That is correct.
And so I thought that was part of the problem. When we mentioned. It looked obvious, and so I thought, gee, I wonder if anybody, when we corrected that, did we go back and look to make sure all of the previous payments were booked correctly? That's what I would do if I found that error on my own.
Yes, myself and Jeremy tore line out by line through water. I personally did water, super treatment. And we did have other small things, but more of a coating on us turning it into the plant. You know, so
It doesn't matter who,
Right.
I'm not,
Right.
I am
But
not
yes,
trying
we
to
did-
do errors.
We did line item by line item. And I will tell you, we found where the sewer, there was a telephone or something that to be in charge for water for 2 months. It's $15, but still we moved it. But yes, because of that, and you know, I found those loan payments while we were preparing for the budget. We just found a lot. I'm like, wait a minute, we're exactly 100% over on each one. So yeah, it's the check and balances that we do, you know. I since have changed it. I check that monthly now. That's where I used to do it, you know, the budget plan. I trust the numbers are there. We know what we spend. We're right in. I mean, you guys can look at the budgets. The water and sewer fund, the stuff that we have to have, labor, electricity, chemicals. I mean, it's just right there every time, you know. So yeah, that's we have been checking it regularly. I just checked it yesterday and had a meeting today. So
What percentage of the water plant expenses is the chemicals that you have to have? And how much more did they go up in the last 3 years?
the last 3 years, so chemicals, so. Let me just pull it up real quick.
Okay,
Yeah.
You guys want to go, please? We haven't got to that part that I'll just pull it up. Are you final piece of here?
Most industries, raw materials.
Let me pull it.
And most, and so basically that's what Max, you're saying, we're just another industry, you know, buying chemicals with our raw material. And that inflation,
and that part of this increase, everybody will understand.
Right.
I mean, there's just almost nothing we can do about that.
And I will tell you guys, you know, we've contacted other chemical vendors. We have I tell council every year, with the exception of last year, we have not had a chemical increase, since that's 5 years. And that's astronomical. We're talking, we buy everything per gallon. We buy many thousands of gallons at a time. We're about 15 cents less than some of our municipalities right next to us because they like Lowell, they're those years of 20 years. The things I don't have control over is electricity. You know, and electricity in the summertime is very expensive. You run on stop, it's 3 days. So it's kind of weather dependent on electricity. Labor is fixed costs and everybody can see labor costs, you know. But chemicals and then the things we have to have. So in this is gonna sound really good, full to forgive health, the little essential things that we use every day to perform our job at. And everybody knows all that stuff. Fuel went up, you know, 2 years ago, we increased our fuel. We want to spend $2,000 a year on fuel. Free vehicle, tractor, you know, everything we do. But when I first started, it's $500. Doesn't seem like a lot, but you only have a $300,000 fund. You know, $40,000 is a lot of that fund. And I'm referring to chemicals, you know, about chemicals. We have state required lab testing. You can see in there that the lab testing, and this is the very essential that we have to do. Jeremy has pulled up there, you know, lab expenses just for analysis of the samples. They have, yeah, and you know, they do an increase every year.
Or you just got another three,
We use analytical. Or we can send the road work, but then you have transportation, and you have to send samples, you know, sewer plant once a week, water plant every other week. So as soon as you do transportation, even if we did it in-house, so I pay a guy working on there, plus the fuel, it just, believe me, I look at this every year, you know. One thing we looked at doing was one to EWEB. EWEB just opened up a water lab at their facility. We're close friends with the director of EWEB, and they reached out and said, hey, we can do your back samples for X, you know, this month. So we're gonna work on getting that contract with them. And, you know, it's only gonna save $3 to $4 a test. But when you do 52 tests a year, it's $150.
How many other cities are of our size are in the same shape that we are? What have they done to take care of their problem? Besides just flat raising rates.
As far as
Have you conversed with other city administrators and around the state?
On this particular issue, no.
Do you think that would be helpful? To see what they might come up with that's different than just flat going for the decimal rate wise? When my problem is, and I get right back to it, is that some departments are doing just fine here. But the water isn't. And there's gotta be a way to tap the good departments to help the poor departments. If I was running this company and it was my own company, I would damn sure figure out a way to do that. Because I guess the state comes in and I don't know why you can't say to them, hey, we need to think about this because we're chasing people away from our town because of your decisions about how we should be running our town. And
You're not wrong, Bill, it's just,
well,
I mean.
gotta be a way to fix it.
Well, and we're unique, you know, the water system was inherited. That's how the city of Lowell was incorporated.
Yeah, I understand. You're deep
It
wells.
wasn't something that was created and built as the city developed. This was why it was
Yeah.
incorporated to take ownership.
Well, we have deep wells to begin with, right?
Well, that was the arsenic legislation that.
Right, and then
prevented us
we had to go to the water plant.
we're gonna go back to the water.
Yeah. And so that should be, there should be some help out there of letting us understand how to take care of our problem. Regardless of what the state laws are, because we're forced into a position that we have the money to fix it, but we can't use it. And that just doesn't make any sense.
Didn't have before.
It would be, it's about 125% of the cost.
Is there a legitimacy to having more than 2 tiers of rates. We want to have the first one be a little bit lower, the variable part of it. And then if you're gonna have a 5-acre garden that you're watering, then that rate goes way up. That's your choice. And then that might, have an entry level folks who can't afford the higher, their base rate could be lower. And we give them on the higher side, more rate levels.
That's one maybe going away, I don't. I think we gotta think out of the box. Just
It was out.
So the budget is in the opposite way for the, but the first tier variable is at a higher rate.
No, it's less.
It's
half.
less, it's
Yeah.
half. And then, okay, so basically what you're saying is tier
5,000
one
gallons, tier one,
is,
then you go over 5 gallons, tier two.
Right.
But what if we make a tier three? That, yeah,
We get a certain point.
1,000 gallons is this little tiny amount. Making this up. 1,000, 5,000 is tier two, and if you do over 5,000. Or something, so that you're helping the lower end for a little bit more water than otherwise. Okay, so. I'm sorry. What are all the inputs? So when I look at the water fund. Resources, like the charges you're burning, is that all the water, is that proper water bill?
Correct,
Okay,
correct.
that was my question. Controller, the 70,000 controller, which is 500,000, is that, will that help? It sounded like it would help control things so you guys aren't 24/7.
No, it would not change how, as far as operation, we'll just keep it at the current level we're on. The PLC, without the PLC, so the PLC is what, the plant is partially automated, right? So when we turn it on, the levels, if this level gets higher, it'll just, just to keep it going at our permitted gallons per minute, right? The only other way to do that without this technology is to man the plant 24/7. So we only have 3 staff members, everybody knows that, right? So no matter how, even if we did V8, M8, N8, we still have the sewer plant, streets, parks, facilities. It just, the overtime, it'd be like the situation I came into in 2014. You guys would be talking about overtime right now, not the water plant, because Maureen knows.
Yeah.
You know, and Bill, you were here, you know. So we did it actually for 3 days. I'll just be honest with you guys when it failed last time. I called Jeremy, you know, it wasn't an emergency situation like it is in summer, but we still had to make water because we were already low from trying to figure it out for 3 days, you know. So we did accumulate overtime because we traded days with comp time. We were very good about trying to get overtime. When I give Jeremy a budget, I feel pretty confident about that. But things come up, you know, water leaks. And the other thing that I was gonna bring up, since Jeremy had this pulled up, if you look at the repair budget, right, so water leaks. When I started here, that number was almost triple what it was, right? So we do a lot of repairs in-house now, but not all of them. And right now, an average repair is costing about $5,000. We average about, and this is a bad number to give you guys, but we average about 10 to 12 weeks a year, right? Did we spend $60,000? No, we did some of the house. We've done some, you know, alternative repairs and stuff, but we can't control leaks. We have a very old infrastructure, very old. You know, there's pipes that have been around since the 50s still. So, you know.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, this sounds like it might be an opportune time for us to dive into the detail sheets, starting with the water fund, if the committee wishes, and perhaps we could dig a little deeper into the numbers.
yeah, I mean, you're talking about this.
This is correct.
Because actually, I've been sitting here circling numbers and stuff as we're talking, so
So if the committee wishes, perhaps this is a good time to jump to that.
yes.
Okay. So the water fund detail sheet starts on page 58. And
Start on page 26.
58.
We're moving. line item. Just a silly question, but I want to make sure I'm understanding. In the budget, things like auditing or city clerk, whatever, these figures are divided amongst the funds at a certain percentage.
That's correct.
Is that set by law, the exact amount, or is there flexibility?
It's not by law. It's, we use an allocation basis based on our internal cost accounting. For instance, with the portion of my salary and the city clerk to the water fund, that's based on our estimate of the amount of time that I have and the clerk has to managing water operations and overseeing that. So it's different based on each type of expense.
We've had those charts before. I mentioned this to you, and you think about doing that for us before we're done. To have that again. I emailed you a while ago, and we weren't gonna get it for this meeting or for the packet, but you thought you might be able to get it before we were done with the allocation.
I do have that information if the committee would like for me to pull it up.
If you could just provide it to us and. That would be great. I mean, I don't need to look at it up there. I just want to,
Okay,
I want to compare it to prior, just to see what's changing. That's what I want to do.
okay, sure.
But under this governmental regulation, we would never put all the salaries in administration of the general fund. We always have to allocate them. Is that, but we want to.
Well, the idea is to try and charge everybody to what they're doing. So, like Jeremy said, if they're working on the water fund somehow, then their time is charged to that.
Can you change and charge more for the sewer as far as salaries are concerned?
That's the one thing we talked about.
And
day-to-day
reduce the
operation.
use here in the water?
Within reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can't put
Yeah.
everybody's
Correct,
salary.
100%.
Right now, and I don't have the exact allocations, but, you know, my staff, me and my staff, primarily, everybody knows water, sewer, street, park. You know, we've been very little time in general fund, you know, maybe doing some maintenance on a building or mowing or something like that, but. So the split is, you know, water and sewer, it takes up primarily most of our days. We got routes, lab, everything, we do repair and maintenance. And then, you know, streets is much less and parks is much less.
Water and
so
sewer are equal.
they should be, I don't know the exact numbers, but yeah, they're pretty close. And I have talked with Jeremy, and over the years, you know, that we do spend a lot more time as far as day-to-day stuff at the wastewater plant. There's just more to do there, more rounds, more moving parts, more, it's a biological process, chemical. But not, honestly, though, I'm not saying, you know, 15% more. I'm thinking, you know, like, when you look at the percentage based on hours, you know, a couple hours more. So like we do a 4 and 4, you take an 8-hour day, 4 hours water, 4 hours sewer, maybe it's a 5 and a 3 or something, you know. It's not significant by any means.
Can you charge the sewer department for this new machine to put on your water plant?
No, it has to go to the fund is,
So I guess my question about allocating salaries for all the city workers is, I don't have a problem with salaries. It's number one, it's hard to see. When I scroll through for, trying to add everything up, it's very hard to see. As a member of the public, I'm not used to this kind of budgeting. So number one, it's hard to see. So the roll-up is helpful. But the other thing is, what does it do for you when you allocate a salary over 10 funds or whatever? When I had my business, I wanted to know the percentages that I was spending on salaries to run my business, aka city. So why is it important to split them up into funds? How does it help us run the city more effectively to see that 15% of a salary is in this fund? Does it help you in some way?
I mean, if the question of the water fund is what we charge residents for the cost to manage the water fund, the personnel is the biggest part of that cost. And I empathize with this desire to be creative and move these funds as much as possible. But that flies in the face of good accounting. And then we get into this situation where someone says, well, how much does it cost for the city to generate our water? And we say, well, on our books, it's this cost. It's not really that cost because we're taking personnel out of there. So that makes me uncomfortable. So that's my only pushback on that. Like, I do empathize and I do want to come up with creative ways, but if it costs us X dollars to run the water plant, we should reflect that in our budget.
Yeah.
Well, and
That's a
generally,
good answer.
your other funds are revenue generating and general fund isn't. So
Right.
in the old days, it was to offset the general fund to try and spread those costs because the general fund cannot afford.
I was just
Okay.
gonna say that the general fund can't pay all this. It needs to be charged to what they're doing, and what they're working on the best.
So on the screen, we have percentages of staff allocation across the different cost centers of funds. We can see that almost 27% of my costs are split among the water and sewer fund. The city clerk's is higher because she prepares the utility bills and has other responsibilities associated with those funds. We can see the public works director is split among parks, community development, and so on. So these percentages are applied to the salaries as well as to the benefits.
Well, I really like the answer that helps you look at a single fund and knowing that it's in balance. What that true cost for running that particular segment is. Totally right.
Hasn't changed much since, say, a year was this, but I think that's 2 or 3 years ago.
It seemed like the other big hit was, if I read it correctly, was a big increase in PERS. Up to 25%.
Mhm.
That right?
We can't do anything about that.
That's
No,
correct.
and I'm not saying we can't, and everybody's getting that, but that, again, no economy of scale here.
Yeah.
So 25% on top of that, no,
Boom.
you know, where do you cut that? You
Yeah.
can't cut the amount you just had to add, and everybody stays the
Yes.
same.
And those are all the reasons that we're seeing increases in growth.
Go ahead, John.
So Jeremy, it's a question on a couple items. The biggest one that's jumping out at me on both water and sewer, is actual cost of 2020, 21, 2022. I'm talking about engineering services, 230,490,6116, engineering services. Actuals were 6,600 and 4,000. Then we budgeted triple, in 2022, 23, estimate for 20, and then we even increased it even more. What is engineering services?
Engineering services are the costs that we pay our city engineer for consulting work, or any other work that they do for us. For the current budget year estimate, one of the things that's driving that is we've had a lot of development related issues. And then there was the East Main Street issue, and a lot of their time has been spent working with us on these unanticipated problems that have arisen. And for the proposed budget, I believe that's where I put half of the rate study of 15,000, and then the other 15,000 for city engineer for anything that might come up like it has this year.
The other thing that it doesn't show is some of that is offset by revenue that we're able to charge to the developers. Isn't that right? That you're billing, and so that'll go up in elsewhere. It's not netted, so it may look higher, but also the revenue associated with that would also be higher.
Okay.
But it's certainly not.
Okay. Yeah, that was the big one that was jumping out. Other repair maintenance. You know, the actual 2021 was 19.9, and you've got proposed budget of 20, so that seems right. And that looks like it's a 1 year it was 20,000, next year it was 7,500, so that must be a very monsters type things
That's
that's
a
not
knock,
proposed.
that's a knock on the wood, hope for no leaks.
Right, yeah,
Yeah, I'm serious.
that's kind of what I'm seeing, yeah.
Okay, so I'm slightly confused, Maureen, with the city engineer.
No,
So if you're allocating the city engineer's services to the water fund, shouldn't the revenue that you're offsetting that with be in this fund too, or no?
It's just on a different page, it's on resources page, it's not
No.
subtracted from the.
Got it. It's still in the water fund. I looked at the bigger
Yes.
picture.
Yeah.
See, and this is the trouble I have, is.
That's government accounting for you.
Too many keys. Yeah.
I was gonna say.
I'm drawing lines to get to the number with over here.
business plan, that you got revenue.
I got one page.
Yeah, you got your revenue,
And then
you
I
got
put it all down.
your operating, your
Yeah.
cost of goods sold.
Sorry.
Here you got this time game.
Correct. To see this whole map, yeah.
Oh, well, that's when I'm coming, and the auditing, I was kind of curious to, our total, and this is the auditing of, financial statements, is that what you're talking about?
That's correct, as well as, I believe, included in that is what we pay our accountant to prepare our financial statements and work with the auditor. I believe that's wrapped in that account.
Is that
too.
okay? So that's what I was curious. So we're looking at 6, 12, 18. What is it, 25K a year for auditing?
That sounds about right.
All right. Sounds right. Reasonable.
We're lucky to be able to keep the auditor, because the school district just lost their auditor. They said just 2 months ago that they're not doing this current year, this new.
Yeah.
And it's the next highest up is triple.
Right, and we use,
The next
we
lower.
use Emerald, and we use Kernan Stokes. And, yeah, Kernan Stokes.
Now, hardly anybody does school district audits, it's part of the problem.
Oh, I see.
It's different,
It's a
yeah.
niche market.
Yeah.
So hang on to them if we can.
Okay, so one question that bugged me that I couldn't track, the 65,548, you kept going in and out of funds, water, sewer. And I couldn't track it. So what is it? Is it interfund loan?
That was the interfund loan from the sewer fund. And let me see if I can walk you through that.
Yeah. Well, it was. Anyway, I never figured out where it ended up.
Okay,
Because it can
Because I couldn't.
It's not.
No. I was really trying hard to find it too.
You're done.
all right. Well, here, okay, so I'm on page 56. Actually 57. You'll see a transfer out from the current year from the sewer fund. You see it?
Yeah, transfer to the water fund.
That's
yeah.
a transfer out. Now let's go to. We're going to go to the resource estimate sheets, the water fund. We're looking at water fund revenues on page 42. Page 42.
Oh, that.
And then you'll see in the water fund, the transfer from the sewer fund. So transfer out from sewer fund, transfer in the water fund from sewer fund. Right.
Like on line 4.
Correct.
Okay.
So while we're at it, let's go to page 41. You'll see in the proposed budget, There's a transfer from the water fund into the sewer fund. That's the water fund paying off the loan. And then if you go to page 59, you'll see in the water fund, there's the transfer out to the sewer fund.
Not confusing at all.
But it tracks, you got it tracked.
I know, but I just have searching in the document for that amount, and I. Fun, thank you.
I just love it when you look at those pages.
It wasn't gonna let that go.
When it works, yes. And you know, I put that in there because we were looking at a crisis in our fund balance. That's not the case now, and that was for cash flow purposes. But Bill brings up a good point that we could potentially loan money from the sewer fund for this PLC. Under state law, there's a longer repayment term. And then that could factor into the rates. You know, it's going to make probably a $2-3 difference. I would have to run the numbers, but it's something.
I would like to see that done and the recalculation of the cash versus accrual error adjustment, and kind of look at the rates again. Is that feasible, or is that, you know, as far as the rates being 40%, what was the percentage increase, 25%, 30%?
No, 38.5.
38.5%. So if we do the corrections needed, and maybe we don't do 65, but we do 40, redo the math and see what increase is needed.
Plus the fact we can get your part for you right away. Right, we borrow money out and pay for it, get you going, get you up now.
Still
Gotta
going to
go
go
through
through the process and everything.
with the proper stuff so that you
Well,
can,
that was the.
you can sit at home and start to plan.
In theory.
In theory.
PLC is really important, it's not just a convenience.
And that's, I think I'd be more concerned about getting that piece of equipment than we get back to some rate. I mean,
Well, it's gonna happen.
okay, it just
Yeah,
needs.
we're very ordered. I mean,
Yeah.
like Jeremy said,
It's not
we
right.
put loans to.
But
We want to do the 7. But
Yeah.
I mean, that's an option. We're gonna buy it regardless. We have to, we have
Yeah.
to. Yes.
the trick is how to pay it.
yeah. I guess we're all in agreement that we need it. How do we present it to the public so it's more palatable? Do we do it? Well, I mean, do you guys think that the general public can handle smaller increases over time? Or, and maybe that's what we've been doing, I don't know.
My original idea is reduce the sewer fees about as much as you want to increase the water fees, so that things kind of stay the same, and the sewer can stand it and the water cannot. Am I reading that right? That there's a balance of 200 and some odd thousand dollars?
As I stated earlier, that factored into my calculations because I paid for some sewer fund projects using sewer fund balance. So we wouldn't have to raise the rates as much. But we could possibly do that for a year, but that's going to reduce the sewer fund balance.
Then you're finally easing into it a little more, instead of one time shot, we're all gonna be in trouble. Sure.
I support John's suggestion. Recalculate it based on what it would have been, so we can see it. Doesn't mean we're gonna do anything different than this recommendation, but we don't know what that is. And then we're doing what we should be doing, and that's looking at recognizing that there was an error and seeing what effect that had on the recommendation.
We're more confident in it.
And with the repayment of the sewer loan over whatever period of time we can, certainly not 20 years, but if it's 3 instead of 1.
So Jeremy, would that stop us from doing projects that get paid out of that sewer fund? Because you keep bringing that up.
I was gonna say,
So if we're borrowing out of that sewer fund and the repayment to allow for lower rate increases to go over a couple of years, does that means that we have some projects that we planned that we now have to hold up?
Well, let's look at that.
Which is my only pushback, and I'll drop it again.
I was thinking the same thing. Is there something budgeted for a plan for your sewer? You were saying.
he has.
Well, I don't think we know that, because if you pay it over 3 years, that's, basically 20 grand a year, not 60 in 1 year, so. I don't think, we'd have to look and see what that effect would be on both cash flow of the sewer fund. To accept that repayment over 3 years, say, I'm just pulling that out of hat. And what effect that has on the ending balance, right?
So say that again, I was busy on my calculator.
If we chose to and are able to repay the sewer loan back over 3 years instead of 1. What he's asking is, will that eliminate, keep us from doing projects that you have budgeted in the sewer fund? If we don't repay the full 65 back the next year.
Well, let me do some math then, real quick.
But that's why I think we should look at it.
And then the thing I was gonna say, this will be my last time, I'll drop it. We are in essence talking about that sewer fund as our rainy day emergency fund. And so if we choose to do this, we're eliminating that fund balance to address other problems that might come up. So I just want to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
If we do this, we're going to not have that contingency fund for the next problem.
So, okay. The end of, at June 30th, 2024, this budget projects if we don't spend any contingencies, there will be $236,000 in the sewer fund balance, okay? So we're gonna make a loan to the water fund. That takes out $70,000. We're down to $166,000 in the sewer fund. We could do a rate relief. To not raise sewer rates as much, possibly for 1 year, but I'll, like Jimmy said, 166,000 is not that much in case there's a sewer emergency.
How much of the project? For the basic project?
So for emergencies, we can't grab money from anywhere else to take care of an emergency. With the understanding that we're gonna pay it back. That we have to maintain that amount in the sewer fund for a sewer emergency. And that much for a water emergency. I just don't understand that. As a business, it just doesn't make sense.
I believe it makes perfect financial sense.
It does if you're running a company and you have all these departments, but they're one pot of money is what controls the company. But it's not that case here. You're doing each department as its own business.
It is. It technically is. The
Well, why
water
do we
fund,
we have the general fund. What's that?
the general fund is everything else.
And so you can't rob out or take out of the general fund for an emergency? You can't use an SDC fund for an emergency?
No,
See, that's, we're trying to run a business with all kinds of reasons that we shouldn't run a business. And that's why I really can't get more argument.
But this government bill doesn't allow. us to do
Well,
that.
the hell with government.
I think what Jeremy, I get what you're saying, like, that's a single company with multiple divisions. But what Jeremy is saying is, this is a multi-company
Yeah.
system set up where there's a parent company, the parent company is a city book. And then you have all these sister or subsidiary companies that are sewer, water, parks. So in theory, you're going, okay, well, that's great. So the parent company. In this essence, it's basically like our parent companies and a lot of different companies, they're just on paper. They don't have any real money, they don't have any real employees, they don't have any real anything. So there's no money to grab from. So, but in real life,
Yeah,
I
would say
Sheet
that,
metal can borrow from Power Guard if it's needed, but government says we can't.
Not in government.
but each one of these has their own bank account, is that right?
No, we just have one bank account. Our accounting software allows us to segregate an account for each dollar.
Well,
So we need to structurally balance the fund.
Yeah.
Basically.
That is correct. That is the essence of government accounting.
So it's that simple or that complicated, but revenue get pretty close in each fund, whatever side left over or starting with, bringing down to the account, whatever we call it. Whatever it is. But yeah, so if we did a 1 or 2 or 3 year thing where we did on an interfund loan, or as long as it doesn't hurt one of the funds, we had no special projects and doesn't reduce that beginning balance too far. Maybe that's an alternate thing just for temporary, but in the end, we gotta figure out how to bring in enough money to pay for the water plant.
Yeah, I
I mean,
mean,
that's the bottom line.
right, it is.
And we're not doing that now, and plus it's not gonna last us too long, so that's the goal, whether we do it this year, next year, over 3 years, over 5 years. The public will never be palatable. Because
not especially the way we're presenting it.
well, no.
We've got to figure out a way to lessen
It's
that.
huge, it would be nice to soften it, but we're gonna have to keep doing it because the cost of the cost, and if they've
Yeah,
done,
but
I believe they've done everything they can do to.
everything's
reduce
going
costs.
up, so they do understand that, and raising rents too. And, only because that's the nature of the game right now. So we can raise these rates, but this is a really heavy shot. And if there's any way we can alleviate that by being clever in loaning, from one department to the other, even though we're gonna pay it back over a period of time, if we set it out so that it makes it a little bit easier, what kind of interest rates are we paying each other?
I'll have to look at the state law. I believe it specifies how you calculate interest on an interfund loan for capital improvements.
Like 1%, 2%?
I believe it's pegged to a certain indicator, but I can't recall off the top
Well,
of
we
my head.
need to know that, so that if we're making the loans, we know what the exposure is for each department. If that's the way we're gonna run the business, and let's be clever with it. I think we can, so.
Or we get a good video with an act, and we open Kickstarter campaign, we do this thing. Bring in that
Public
70,000.
Works calendar.
I guess.
Oh,
Not me though, my staff.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
You're.
we can do that.
I guess I don't like this, I mean, none of us like the rate, and I'm not saying we shouldn't spread it out, I'm not sure, but think about the fact we're loaning, we're borrowing out of the sewer fund, and even if we soften the blow, are we just gonna end up in more trouble next year or the next year? And, that's what I don't wanna see is, yeah, we softened it this year, but next year it's even bigger. I don't know.
Yeah, it's based on an error. We would never have he would not have prepared this request at this level without knowing that we had $41,000. It would have been an increase, and it should have. And I'm not even saying not do the full meal deal. I just want to see,
What it is.
as you said, where it would have been had we not.
No, I
That's
disagree with you. I just
That's all.
want us to be thinking about all of it,
Right,
that's
'cause-
all. I'm not disagreeing that we should look at it again. I just don't want it to keep increasing as years go on.
I agree.
You're gonna have to increase it.
Well, what I mean is if we don't increase in this
you got
year,
that.
what's it gonna do next?
Increasing it. That is given, justifying it, public, if somebody asks us. Yeah,
Without,
so in essence of time, and I mean, we'll stay here all night, I guess, if we have to, but, I think we should move on. My suggestion is, let's let Jeremy recalculate. And see. If there is a huge swing, what is your number after the fact? And so does that mean we need to come back again next week? You tell me, like, are we trying to approve this budget tonight?
No, I would encourage the committee not to rush through this. We owe it to ourselves to take the appropriate time to do this right. And I have a meeting scheduled on Wednesday next week in case it's needed, and I can do the analysis that you're mentioning within the week's time. One question I would have for the committee, knowing that the water fund balance is not in such an emergency state, it's still critical, is if the budget committee has a target that they would like to see the water fund balance for June 30, 2024.
I would support your suggested fund balance. And okay.
Isn't the math really easy on this to figure out what we're looking at? So right now we got 5280 difference for this. And we had a 40K error, which is 40%. So if you throw 40% at 5280, that's 2112. So wouldn't there be a reduction in 2112 of the suggested increase of the water rate? Isn't the math that simple?
So wasn't there 2 items?
I don't think it's that simple, because the way we do it, we take the number of EDUs, which is not the number of homes, the number of billable EDUs, and you took it over, our requirements, whichever you did it. Oh, there you go, yeah.
Let me see if I can do this on the fly. So if there's no savings target, then the per EDU rate goes to $38.62. So it goes. It goes from $46.72 to $38.62. So whenever I prepared the water rates, I factored in a targeted savings. So the rates that customers pay for the per monthly rate, that's a little bit extra than our fixed costs. So that for a targeted savings rate throughout the 12-month period. So what I did is I just took that out. And that reduced if you look on page 6, under proposed rates, there's a per EDU for the water. That changed it from $46.72 per month to $38.62 per month. $10.41.
And what would that do to our overall?
That would mean there is no, unless expenses are less than budgeted or revenues come in higher, we don't have a built-in savings.
I don't understand that. Are you saying ending balance would be 0?
No.
I don't understand the savings. I don't understand that.
So
We were talking about having 100,000, is that?
eventually.
Okay, not necessarily in a year.
So whenever I prepared the rate analysis, what I did is I took all of the expenses for the water fund and I categorized them for fixed and variable. And for all the fixed ones,
Jeremy, you gotta take. You're double dipping your expenses, 40,000, what you did.
So instead of 331,000 to 70 for fixed cost, it's minus 40.
no, it's not, unless you want to eat up that entire 40. That's our beginning balance.
That's our cost
No.
from this business. That fund balance is separate from what it costs actually generates the water. Those are two separate topics.
Okay, so
So we can talk about the accounting and where that 40 came from. but the actual cost, which is what Jeremy's talking about here. Because we have been running a deficit and not meeting the cost per year to run the water. So this catches us up to that, part of why it's such a big jump. And then on top of that, Jeremy was trying to bake in an ending fund balance, or not an ending fund balance, a contingency fund. So we need to raise the rates dramatically just to even out.
Right.
Separate from the whole 40,000. And then on that topic, so I can jump in. Is the auditor coming to council?
Yes.
In June.
Because I have a lot of experience with audits and discrepancies far larger than this, which seems we're vilifying this a bit. And I think maybe, as none of us are auditors, we should step back and not air that out right now. We should wait until we have the auditor here, who's the expert, and we can ask questions about what happened. I'm still a little uncomfortable with some of the frustration I'm hearing towards Jeremy.
My comment, and let me clarify, is just, had that not happened, had the auditor found that everything was in order and Jeremy did his job just like he does every day, and that hadn't occurred, what would the numbers be? That's all I'm asking for. I don't care who did what. I'm an accountant, I made my share
That's fair.
of plenty. All I wanna see is, had that not happened, what would we be looking at? That's all I wanna see, and it's gonna be an increase, and we may choose to go above that, and probably will, because we know where the cliff is. Just like to see that, because I think that's what we would have been sitting here looking at.
Instead of $60 more a month.
Well, I'm not even talking about the rates, I'm just talking about the numbers, what the end of the year and last year was, and how that affects. And only because it's significant, if it was 10,000, that for me would be significant, but 40 grand in this fund is significant for our thing. And we deem that would be for comparison.
It'd be like 5 cents.
Yeah. So it's not the error, it's just, what would that look like?
And
So if I came across as trying to vilify anybody, and apologize, because that's not.
the also, I wasn't attacking anybody, like.
And I don't think any one person was, it just felt like kind of read the room, that the frustration was seeming to reach a tipping point, but I just felt I needed to say that.
Yeah, I truly think, like Jeremy said, it, I don't think we should rush into it, I think we should take a step back. We work, you know. If we want to approve this budget tonight, then we've got a situation. But I don't think we should, you know. I think there's things that need to be looked at. And is the water fund the only problem? Jim?
None of the other funds are in a serious situation, in my opinion.
So,
Those general fund has some structural issues that we need to figure out over the next year, but it's not in a dire condition.
and that's the feeling I got from your letter. That,
Yeah.
hey, the water fund's in trouble, we need to do something about this, but everything else seems to be.
Better than Kickstart, we have a city car wash fundraiser using city water.
So I heard a suggestion earlier, take a break. Do we want to do that? Or is everybody? No, okay. So Jeremy, help me out for the movie. Where are we? Are we still on new business number 1, or there's no public here?
Well, we need to go through all the estimate sheets. We spent a lot of time on the water fund and we need to run through everything.
Okay.
But one question that I have for the budget committee, I understand the analysis that you want before Wednesday, and I want to make sure we have an efficient meeting and that I could have everything in a final draft. With everything that's been discussed tonight, do you have a targeted level of fund balance that you would like to meet in the water fund for June 30, 2024?
Your suggestion is what, 100,000?
Eventually.
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 Okay, so, we want to tier that up to 100,000 in.
I'm asking for the committee's thoughts on that.
50,000 the first year, halfway there, I don't know what's realistic.
What,
We can build it.
Matt, so what could happen? I'm not putting you on the spot, Max, I really, I don't mean, I'm just, so, because it scares me, one of the things that said, we have pipes that have been constant for 10 years.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, $100,000, we could say, oh my gosh, yeah, okay, let's tear it up, 50, 75, 100. But tomorrow, I mean, could break, and we're gonna spend that 100. So, back to Bill's question is, we're not gonna have it, but how would a normal city pay for something like that? Do we go out and borrow?
It would be a loan, most likely,
From
unless
a regular lending institution.
from a lending
Not-
institution.
Not from a fund.
Correct.
So that would be an emergency loan that we needed to pay over.
Correct.
So. Yeah, I think 50 the first year.
But so, am I looking at this correctly? There's $456,000, $457,000 in the general fund. And if we have an emergency, we can't touch that money.
Debt schedule, that's how much we owe.
How much money we got in the bank?
For the general fund,
For, you told us, you said that there's one, I know we're, that was my oranges
I
here,
am looking at.
but how much?
Wrong way, Bill.
Wrong way.
the last time I looked at our bank statements and we have a pooled cash account with the local government, LGIP. Maybe $1 million.
That's all.
That's everything.
Everything. Extra beyond the budget. Yeah,
What's our run rate?
it's
Not a lot.
no, that's not. That's not like that's money we can just pull from if we need it. It's budgeted.
Right, no, I understand.
The proposed general fund ending balance is $25,000. Estimated to be 220 at the end of the year. Is that correct?
Estimate 250. Hold on. Nope, I'm on the wrong page.
Page 28.
Yeah, yeah. So if we don't spend any contingencies, general fund balance as of June 30, 2024, according to these numbers here, would be 296,000.
So, general question, for a city of our size, you said 100,000 for the water fund. Is there some number that is like appropriate for the different funds of cities our size we're shooting for into these funds?
That's a great question. We haven't done that kind of benchmark analysis, but we should. That could give us
10% of the annual budget or.
the Government Finance Officers Association recommends at least 3 months expenditures for cash flow purposes.
You know.
We passed a resolution several years ago that 17 should be kept as a balance in the funds.
In each fund? Okay.
Overall or
There's some,
in the general fund or overall?
each fund should have a 17%
17.
reserve for balance or whatever. Well, there you go, fine word, I like.
Contingency.
Have we hit it since then?
Just in case. We're gonna make it.
I want to be 5'6".
Okay, Mr. Chair, To keep things moving along, what I'm gonna do next week, in advance of next week's meeting, is I'm going to adjust the fund balance for the water fund. I'm gonna factor in a capital loan from the sewer fund for the PLC. And I'll adjust the numbers so that the ending fund balance for the water fund for fiscal 24 ending will be $50,000. Is that what the committee wants to see?
We also see next to that, if we don't do the capital fund transfer,
Sure.
two scenarios
At all.
at all. Want to see it?
So in that case, the water fund would completely pay for the PLC.
Back to my whole concern, we're treating the sewer fund as a rainy day. Why have it now? It's just a scenario.
Yep.
Yeah, that's important.
Okay. All right, so let's move on to the other detail sheets.
Doing great. Oh,
Yeah.
we're so happy to have two jobs. Or Maureen.
I'm working that way.
So what page are we on?
This, we're on page 40. And I'm gonna run through these estimate sheets, and I'm just gonna call out changes that are $5,000 or greater. And I'm gonna keep going unless you stop me. All right? General government operating grant, that was ARPA money, one-time revenues. Library capital grant, one-time revenues. Parks operating grant, Rolling Rock Park Phase 1, budgeted but not received and don't plan on it. Garbage franchise freeze, that's new with Santa Pack. Water franchise and sewer, those are franchise fees that the water and sewer funds pay to the general fund, and that factors in the rate increase. Land use and development, that's what we charge developers to process land use applications. We've had an increased activity for that, and those are my projections. That Lisa was one area that Maureen mentioned earlier of where that shows up when developers repay us. SDC admin fees. That's the administrative fee for us to process system development charges. I don't project as much building next year. Loan proceeds, that's the Business Oregon loan for the City Hall construction, one-time deal. Capital asset disposal. That factors in the Rolling Rock and City Hall sale. The sale of 205 East Main Street was in the current year, and that's not going to be next year. All right, sewer fund, water sewer sales, that's based on projected rates. Sewer system reimbursement. That's what we charged to administer SDC fees, not as much building. Loan proceeds, that's if we decide to go for a loan for the East Main Street, East First Street repair. Transfer from water fund, we discussed that earlier. Water fund, that's based on the rates as presented tonight. Bulk water sales, I need to add that in. That was left out in error. Water reimbursement SDC, again, left out in error. I should put something in there, but it's not going to be as high. All right, street fund, state distributions, that's our highway tax. That's a formula from the state based on population. Loan proceeds for the East First Street repair in case that's what we want to do. A building fund. I kept it at the current year. That might actually be less, but it doesn't really impact that much with the building fund. Blackberry Jam revenues are significantly lower. There's a transfer from the general fund. Sewer water, all the SDCs are based on decreased building. It's mostly the beginning fund balances, the resources in those funds. The sewer reserve and the water reserve fund are based on some loans that we have. The loans require us to set that money aside for our last loan payment. Okay, page 45, Administration Department. Financial Services, that's increase in the accountant contract. Building repair and maintenance, that was construction at City Hall. Buildings and facilities. Facilities and maintenance, let's go back to that. Where was it? Building repair and maintenance. I believe that was equipment and other items.
The HVAC wasn't it? Also, the news.
Yeah, that's where I put it, but it actually came out of capital outlay.
The 73 grand that we budgeted for this year?
Correct. That came out of capital outlay. And yeah, we're still to the good on that. I don't anticipate any major changes. Equipment and furnishings was office equipment that we purchased for City Hall. The buildings and facilities for proposed, that's for the old City Hall demolition. Code enforcement, no major changes there. Community Development Department, engineering services, those have trended high based on land use applications. We have some ongoing development. This is going to continue in the next fiscal year. That is partially offset by the land use fees mentioned above. Debt service, that's all based off of the loan schedule, and you can see the 307 was paid off this year. Library, a change in health insurance. The employee does not have health insurance. The capital outlay, that was from construction, no other major changes. Municipal court, no major changes. Parks and recreation, water services, that's not as high as we thought it was going to be, so we cut that. Parks improvements, that was Rolling Rock Park Phase 1, not received this year and not planned for next year. Police services, no major changes. That's based on our contract with them. Tourism, no major changes. Other requirements, there's a transfer to the Blackberry Jam Festival. Other than that, no major changes. Sewer department, I'll let you take that over, Max.
Sewer department, Jeremy stated early, first 25.8, whatever it was before that, so increase for that. Engineering services, this with the building and everything talked about. Also, some of that money is for the East First Street repair. We didn't bring it up, but there's money in the sewer fund for that because the water line undermined the sewer fund about 400 feet. So without digging up inspecting, we don't know if we need to do any work there yet. So put some money in there also. Let's see here, water services, same thing. We had a leak repaired, decrease in the water services. Sewer system. I'm sorry, projects. That's the 90,000. If we have to do work to the sewer line under East First Street. Contingency, just to change from what we're proposing tonight. And of course the ending fund balance difference. Water fund, you're gonna see the PERS again at the bottom there. Same thing on engineering services. The 10,550, that is repair and maintenance, equipment repair and maintenance. Just a trending, you know. Yeah. Yes, non-capitalized assets, I don't have my notes, I do have my notes here, what's the fund number on that?
490, 6334.
So water meters. So new development, we got the new, 14 people going in here, 5 months on the hill.
Putting 1,100 horsepower engine in your pickup.
No, no. Not yet. Okay, the software, that is the PLC, the 70,000 there, that's what we put the PLC. Water system improvement decrease. That's where we funded the water meters out of. Same continues, just the change in the fund balance. And then, of course, the transfer to the sewer fund, under transfer valve. And then that unappropriated any fund balance. I don't think there's any change in the streets currently, we're pretty close to last year. So. Except for the street, yep, so under capital outlay, the 200,000, that is the East First Street repair. The paving project. The contingency, obviously the leftover, and then same unappropriated fund balance. And I'll let you take her back over there, Jeremy, on building fund.
No major changes in the building fund. I budgeted for equipment and furnishings. We're not going to spend that this year. And for new filing cabinets and the like for building files, but we don't need it, so we're not spending that this year. Blackberry Jam Festival. The 5250, that's for an evaporative cooler. For our volunteers for the information booth, I believe we need to pay a little more attention to heat safety this year, and if we were to take that out, the transfer from the general fund would not be necessary. But I put this in there at least to get the conversation started about that.
Well, that's good. What I understood is some air conditioner or something in the booth or the Blackberry.
An evaporative cooler?
Yeah.
Yes, something to put out there to keep the volunteers cool.
Would it be easier to do a misting system to have the.
We could do that. I don't think that's
I think
going
it'd be a lot
to, it would be. It's not what
less.
okay.
And, it could be that it's gonna be really hot. We're Oregonians, we know about heat. And, it's been hot in that booth before, no doubt. But with the misting system, it really works out very well. So it would be, simply running water to it and putting it around the top of the tent, let it go. I think we could do it for $200 or $300. I mean, that's not a heavy duty item. I saw it in there and thinking, where did that come from? Who wanted that? Or
That was my idea. I don't.
no idea. Bless your heart, trying to take care of us. So
Thanks,
that's
Paul. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's good.
fine. Yeah.
City property after the event to be benefit with an evaporating cooler and other situations.
It possibly could. I thought about that. So
We had some events at the new libraries, and stuff, or.
Well, yeah, if you could use it somewhere else.
Right.
Then maybe it makes sense, but, just for that particular weekend, I don't know if it does.
And since we stopped here, I think everyone on the committee has an obligation to come over.
Thanks.
That's significant.
As far as the misting go, the misters aren't gonna be that expensive. You might put 2 or 3, 4 stations around the whole park. Because if you're hot over there,
And since the water department's got a lot of water, let's use it.
But I would go with more than one station.
That's right.
We'd rather go with just.
We use the misters at, Glenwood at our facility, which is great, it's all summer, we're in 100 degrees, it's outside all day. Everybody's fine. We just run out of there, run back out. But again, if the other piece of equipment, do we have a place to store it? And we're not using it, that would be another issue, because we have storage issues. But,
I'll defer to Max on this one.
We are limited on space.
yeah, so that'd be another negative, but it is something that we could use in multiple events, then it might be worth the investment, if not, I like it.
I like the idea about having multiple ones.
Oh, yes, the whole park.
I would move movable. Because after the end of the first day, you've got a big mud puddle there, but the children just don't love standing in it. So
I think-
somewhere where you can move it just a few feet, you know, just.
I think just arches, if you walk down the pathway, arches.
I got one other, and I don't know if it's in here anywhere, but I'd like to bring it up, and that's the caboose. I can't understand why we can't kill the mold that's on it and paint it at least. And is there any money anywhere that can be used to do something? Has the council talked about it, or is it, it looks so bad, a poor damn caboose, and we can't change the siding on it because they don't make it anymore. It's not the same. I've seen other cabooses where they actually put plywood on it.
To answer your question, Bill, we are working on it, met with the Parks Department and then also council last meeting. We are gonna have something done by Blackbird Gym. It might not be the Taj Mahal, but yes, we're working on getting the paint, to get it done, and we already have some volunteers that are in that way.
Yeah.
George Wild kind of headed up, but yes, we are gonna make something happen. Hopefully way before Blackbird Jam, but we are working on it.
And there is money here.
When we get to the parks, yeah, we'll get to the parks.
Okay, all right.
We already passed the parks, Max.
Oh, we already, yeah, we did have some money, and then also we received money
Oh, it is.
specifically for that project, yes.
Great. Great. I'm happy to.
Go, sir.
That's right, that is under this current year budget, Bill's here not gonna reflect it, it's not gonna be shown on next year's, but yes, we do have a plan.
Okay.
Yep.
Sewer SDC, the 62,000 is to complete our sewer master plan. Water SDC, I have budgeted for capital outlay. In case there are any projects that we want to do, that appropriation is there. Street SDC, same thing. The capital outlay appropriation is there in case there are any street capacity increasing projects we want to do. Same thing for storm, same thing for parks SDC. The sewer reserve fund and the water reserve fund, our lender for one of our loans requires us to have this. And that goes toward the final payment on one of our loans. And that ends the detail sheets.
Jeremy, I don't think we need this for the next meeting unless other people want it, but it might be really helpful to see a longitudinal debt outlay map showing us when we expect these kind of debts to fall off.
Just a column with the date, because otherwise it's gonna be.
What's interesting about the map is we get to see our total debt load and where we expect that to drop off. And when we discuss taking out other debt, what that would do to that outlay. Because I hear you on the date.
Might have to last like decade, maybe, to compress it.
I do have that information. If you want to look at it now, I can pull it up or we can wait. Okay. Do you want to look at it now or do you want to wait?
What's that?
The debt schedule.
I heard a no, I saw a no and I heard a sure.
I know what the term.
I take my shirt back.
I think
Not sure what that means.
Wait it is.
Yeah, where am I?
We are on public are there any questions? Okay, we are on public comments on the recommended fiscal year budget. So, Mr. Chair, if you could open up a public hearing for comments from the public. Just, bang the gavel. Yes.
At the time.
Yeah.
Forty after 8:20. We have nobody on, well, behind me, and we don't have anybody on
That's correct.
screen, so we close the public comment.
Yes.
At 8:21.
I'm fine.
And the evening, but today,
You'll need it to adjourn.
oh, okay.
Yeah, on the back.
Well, no,
So
wait, that was,
so we got,
that was,
that was number
wait,
two.
yeah,
There was a public hearing. It was advertised that we're going to have a public hearing
on the state revenue sharing funds, not.
on the recommended budget. Yes. And there is one, the next item, number 3, is another public hearing.
Right, and that was for tonight.
Correct.
Okay, so again, we open it up to the public hearing. 8:21.
Yes, and Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'll note for the public that in the budget, we estimate receiving for fiscal year 23-24, 11,800 in state revenue sharing, 780 for cigarette tax, 23,680 for liquor tax, 2,400 for marijuana tax. Members of the public are invited to comment on any proposed uses for these funds.
And again, we don't have any in public here, so I can go ahead and close it. So I close the public hearing, now close at 8:24. Y'all put me here. There you go.
Good plan.
Wow.
I should say,
No.
so, okay, so Jeremy, for consideration of fiscal year 2023-2024 tax rate of 2.1613. Discussion, possible action, suggestion, motion. I move to approve the fiscal year tax rate. That's, yeah, that's it. I'm going to use.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If the committee wishes, this is on the agenda. We do need an approval from the Budget Committee either tonight or next week. If you choose to table this item, we do need a motion from the Budget Committee to approve the tax rate.
How much more is it
It's same.
than last year?
The tax rate, it is $2.1613 forever.
Forever?
That is our permanent rate.
And that's what it was last.
Right.
We're just approving.
Correct.
Okay. We can vote on that.
You could vote on this tonight.
I make a proposal that we approve the tax rate as written. And a second?
All right, we have a proposal and a second. Approving the tax rate. 2.1613. What's the word there? Approve or
All in favor?
all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Pass. Number.
We're rolling now.
Moving on now. So. Number 5, consideration fiscal year 2023 recommended budget. That's where we're gonna. This is the same,
Yeah, we're gonna table it.
and we're gonna table that because.
Yeah, is that gonna change?
Well, one thing that you could do is, approve a motion to postpone action on this until next week's meeting.
I'll make a motion to postpone action on this until next meeting.
And I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion to postpone till next meeting on the recommended budget. Second. All in favor?
Right?
All opposed? Okay. Postpone the next meeting.
Good job.
Thanks, Bill. You and I are gonna talk over the fence. No. We can, close another business, the other business. Okay. So. Okay, I would say we are adjourned at 8:26.